Okay, now that we know how to do variable declarations, we can talk about some of the other things, like other types of variables, because so far all we've talked about is integral and floating point types. Now, I'm not going to dwell much on Boolean types and that sort of thing. Instead, we'll talk about ranges. Seems like an interesting topic. Ranges. There we go. And I'll comment out the previous one so that the output doesn't distract us. So here we are, another function for the ranges. So what is a range exactly? Well, a range is a special type in the sense that it benefits from a special form of construction. So let me give you an example. So let's have val a being an int range, and we initialize it with values from 1 to 10. Now, it's important to stress here that unlike in many other languages, this is and closed range, and by closed we mean that it has all the values from 1 to 10. So it does include the value of 10, because in some other languages it doesn't. So this is a closed range with all the values from 1 to 10. And what we can do with this range is, well, obviously we can print out the elements, for example. So I can say print line. Well, actually, let's use a for loop. I know we'll talk about for loops in a while, but I'll just use one anyway. For x in a, we're going to print line the value of x. So let's see what we get. Should get values from 1 to 10. Come on. Yay! So here is the output, all the values from 1 to 10. Now, this is just a special form, so the dot dot is just a special form for what's essentially a function call. So if I comment this out for a second, we can do it in a more conventional way. So let's do it. First of all, I'll just say val a. I'm not going to say int range anymore because type deduction. Because as I said in the previous clip, you don't really have to type in those type names for the most part. Okay, so what I can say is I can say 1 dot range 2 10, and that would be the equivalent of what we just wrote. Now, you probably have many questions like, how are you calling a method on an integer? How does that work? And this is in fact possible in Kotlin thanks to extension functions. So we have an extension function range 2. We can actually navigate to it, see what it's like. Let me do that. Oh no, it's not even going there for some reason. Well, never mind. Maybe it's some special construct. So we have a range of values from 1 to 10 by calling the range 2 function on an int taking another int. So it gives you a special object. By the way, I can put the cursor here, press Alt Enter, specify the type explicitly, and you can see that it is in fact an int range. Okay, so the end result here would be exactly the same, but of course what we're really getting is we're getting an object which has it has certain methods. Like for example, I can reverse it. So let's just call reversed, for example. So now my int range is reversed. I have an opposite thing. However, reversed is no longer an int range itself. So let's see what we're getting instead. We're getting something called an int progression. So we're getting a different type, which is also, a sequence of integers. And now if I run this, then, well, we should get the numbers going from 10 to 1. So let's see what we get. Yep, that's exactly the output. We get values from 10 to 1. All right. So what else can we do with this int progression? Well, lots of things. For example, if I want to print the sum, I can say that the sum of ints in this int progression, so in $a, is equal, and then I'll use even more advanced kind of string splicing, and I'll say a.sum, because guess what? Int progression has a it's not int progression which has this function, but the supertypes have this function. So let's run this, and this should hopefully give us 55. I think that's what the sum of numbers from 1 to 10 is. Hooray! So the sum of ints. Okay. Now this is interesting. You'll notice that we have reversed, and the output is 10 down to 1. It's not 1 to 10. So might be wondering what's going on there. Let me explain. So at the moment, we have an int range going from a smaller value to a larger value. Now, what would happen if we tried to do it from a larger value to a smaller value? So for example, what if I said var b equals 10 to 1, and then for y in b, print line y. Now, unfortunately, and I'm telling you this ahead of compilation, this wouldn't print anything. you see there is no output here. We were expecting like 10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and so on, but we get no output. So essentially the idea is that ranges are always going from the smaller value to the larger value. So if you want something going from 10 to 1, then instead of doing this, you do 10 dot down to 1. Okay, so this is possible. And we can print this and see the output. All right, so here are our values, 10, 9, 8, 7, and so on. However, if we look at the output here, it says 10 down to 1 as a single word. So that's probably a hint. This down to is related to this down to. Now, there is a bit of a catch, or not a catch, but actually another feature of Kotlin that you have to be aware of, is that when you're calling a function like this, what you can do is you can omit both the dot as well as the round brackets. So what does this mean? This means that instead of writing 10 dot down to 1, we can simply write 10 down to 1. And this has exactly the same effect. So this is essentially a bit of a trick that Kotlin employs to make some of the notation a bit more readable. However, it obviously doesn't solve our problem of what if we don't know? What if we, for example, we have two values? Let's say I have m equals 8 and I have n equals to -3. What if I want to build an int range? How do I do it? I cannot simply say val c equals int range from m to n. Unfortunately, if m is greater than n, it's going to be an empty range. So we would have to do something like math.min mn and then math.max mn, and this would work. So then I could do for z in C, print line z, and this should give us a listing of all the numbers from -3 to 8, once again inclusive. So we're including both ends of the range, and here it is. So -3, -2, 1, and all the way up to 8. Okay, so these are roughly the ranges. Another thing that you have to also be aware of is that when you're making a range like this one, you can also specify the steps. So here we're changing a value by 1 at each turn, but you can actually change it by different values. So for example, what I can say is I can say val d equals, and I can say starting at 100 down to 1, I want to go with a step of 3, and then let's print out the result. So I'll say for x in d, let's print the value of x followed by a tab, because I'm tired of scrolling, to be honest. This is a bit exhausting. So let's print the value and then the tab, and I'll just do a print line at the end. Okay, so let's see what we get. All right, so we get 100, and then we subtract 3, so we get 97, 94, and down it goes all the way down to 1. And this is what ranges are essentially all about.